This is episode number 466 of the Health and Fitness Podcast, brought to you by InnerFight in association with Smith Street Paleo. Get all of your paleo food delivered to your house or office every day, so you don't have to think about food. You can just open the bag and hop into all the goodness that Smith Street Paleo is. This week we're joined by a guest from the UK, a guy with an incredible amount of experience. Enjoy the show. Welcome back, folks, to another edition of the Health and Fitness Podcast by InnerFight. Thank you for tuning in, and thanks also to Tom Walker, who's slowly trying to take over the Health and Fitness Podcast with all of these guests. Mate, you found us someone else today. Give us a little bit of background on how you actually got our guest of today on the show.
Well, each week I get an email into my inbox from Matt Lovell, who's on the show today, and it's always a really informative email that I take about 20 minutes to half an hour to read through and pick out all the gems of it. And so now we have him here live.
Have him. Matt Lovell, all the way from London on Skype. Mate, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk to us. How's things?
Really good, thanks. No problem at all. No, it's nice, really nice for you guys to have me on to talk nutrition this morning. It's brilliant.
Awesome, mate. Why don't we kick off? Give us a little bit of background on yourself and sort of what you do in the world of nutrition. That's probably the best start point.
Cool. So, without sort of life history, a brief rundown. I'm basically working half really in elite sports and half with normal folk, and I do a role which is sometimes called performance nutritionist, sometimes called clinical nutritionist. I'm trained as a nutritional therapist. I've been doing it professionally about 20 years, and I've been lucky enough to work across all sports really at a really good level. I was England rugby nutritionist for 15 years through 4 World Cup cycles, 7 seasons with Tottenham Hotspur, 6 Man City, and I'm currently looking after Bournemouth and Reading football clubs and a Georgian rugby team.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you bring a little bit of experience to the table then, mate.
I hope I do.
Was one of those World Cups the one England won?
Yes, it was. Fortunately, my role started 2 years before the 2003 World Cup.
Wow.
Did you get a medal?
Hey, did I get a signed ball?
Did you get a medal?
No, I didn't.
What?
Oh, mate.
I know.
Should have robbed one of the players when they were drunk.
I know. No.
Mate, let's jump into that. I mean, that's quite a good start point, especially for the English, and not really for Tom because he's Welsh. But how did that come around? How did you start working with the England rugby team? Because I mean, that's like right at the top of sort of performance, isn't it? Especially a Rugby World Cup.
Yeah. So essentially, as soon as I qualified, I went straight into an apprenticeship on Harley Street, working with doctors, other nutritionists, dietitians, and in the first 6 months, that clinic was already looking after a number of Saracens players, some of whom were England players, right. And that work then spiraled into looking after the England team. And then a short while after that, the clinic closed down, but the Rugby Football Union wanted the continuation of care, so they brought one of the senior doctors, Adam Carey, and myself in to run the nutrition.
Wow!
And that's how it happened. It's like one of those things. It's sort of, you got to work your ass off, but also at times you're in the right place at the right time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Matt, you said at the start, we always pick out when people say this, you said you were lucky enough to work with the team, but actually it was through you doing what a lot of practitioners should do, which is like the lower end, like starting out work that led you to obviously getting a place with the team. What, you've just been told you're going to be the nutritionist for England. Where do you start? Like, what do you do? Because it's not luck that you've got there. You're obviously very good at what you do. So what is your first port of call?
Well, I think the I think you're right. You've got to be good at what you do, or you don't get jobs like that. But I think the thing with that is that you just continue to do what you're trained to do. So I think the word individualized nutrition or personalized nutrition is bandied about a lot these days. But that we were amongst some of the early adopters of those sorts of principles of functional medicine and integrated medicine. And so we were doing the blood tests, we were correcting deficiencies, we were using like a high-end sports supplementation, obviously all drug screened and all natural and all the rest of it. But we got a head start really on other international teams who have, to be fair, everyone's really caught up now. It's much more of an even playing field, but I think we were ahead of the game back then.
What were you doing that was so much different, mate?
Well, nothing that crazy looking at what people currently do, but it's tailoring. Look, if you start with the basic stuff, it's tailoring macros for according to lean body mass. So basic stuff like that. So ensuring everyone's got adequate protein, the right kind of fats, carbohydrate cycling according to energy intensity of their weekly cycle. So they maybe restrict carbs when they need to drop fat, increase carbs for performance, and then a big focus on cleaning up. So clean. I still use the word clean foods. I don't mind using that, but organic where possible. Everything cooked from scratch. Getting rid of all the crappy foods, processed foods. Nothing with chemicals, additives, all that. As far as possible.
Yeah.
So the sort of 80-20% rule kind of applied to that. And then once they're in a really good place with their nutrition overall, then you're putting in cycled sports supplementation. So things we all read about all the time. Creatine, fish oils, correct use of multivitamin. We had protocols to induce like really deep restful sleep using amino acids. That was quite innovative. So we looked at what people were doing in burns victim hospitals.
Wow.
Actually, some of the early research was all done in France back then, and they were using like IV, but also oral amino acid supplementation to grow tissue back really quickly. So. Wow. Obviously, in a setting like that, if you don't grow your skin back quickly, then you die. But in a rugby player, it's all about recovery because it's such a massive collision-based sport that the quicker you can recover and the higher your lean mass overall as a squad on average as well, the more dominant you can be as a team. And I think we see that again and again. Teams that get that right, get the S&C right, and get the right balance between strength, power, endurance. They're physically, as long as they got the skill base to back it up, physically they can dominate and run over other teams.
How was it? I mean, mate, that was quite early 2001. I actually remember when I was playing rugby when I was at university, and I played for a club side, and after training, I think on a Thursday night, they'd feed us, so we got enough food, and I think we were given a hot pork pie and some mushy peas. So that was probably only in I think I finished university in 2000. So what I'm getting at, mate, is that what you're talking about now, people obviously like they get it, and we've heard about organic foods, but back in the day, like 2001 or early 2000s, all of this stuff must have been quite sort of new to people. Was there a certain amount of resistance, or how was it taken?
Well, to be honest, within that environment, it was really well tolerated. You've always got one or two resistant players potentially who are just harder to work with in terms of behaviour change. But the core philosophy and the way that team structure was one, I mean, everybody just lapped it up because they knew they could just feel the difference.
Yeah.
They they'd be playing at a level, and then they'd have the nutritional intervention, and then a few months later they'd be physically looking very different, playing very differently, recovering much more efficiently.
Who did you see the biggest changes in with which players? Give us a few examples of which players actually benefited the most from cleaning up their diet.
Well, I mean, across the squad, you'd be looking at lean mass in average increases of 4 or 5 kilos, combined with dropping 2 to 3 kilos of fat mass. I mean, I remember Danny Grucock was an example of someone in the rugby in the pre-training Rugby World Cup camp. He gained 10 kilos in weight in body composition change. So he gained 6 kilos of muscle mass and lost 4 kilos of fat.
Wow.
So his body composition overall change, if you add those two together, was, we used to combine that, so his overall change was 10 kg positive.
That's incredible. Mate, talk us through how you actually achieve that in a sports person like that, because I think that's one of the biggest things for a lot of, even just the general population. Like, they want to, or they think they want to increase muscle mass, but they want to lose fat mass as well. So how did you put that in place in this situation?
Well, the first thing I would say is that it's an extreme result because he's in a controlled environment. So he's got 3 months of being cooked for, they're 2 hours in the weight room before breakfast. They'd be training 3 times a day, eating somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 calories, all of which is, high quality. And then on top of that, they had the full sports supplementation support.
Right.
So Aminos, recovery drinks, everything.
So quite different from the general population, of course.
Yeah. So you could probably expect to... Sorry, just decline that.
That's all good. Answer it if you want, if they're interested, mate. We'll get them on the show.
Is it Danny Grucock?
So general public could expect, to see, about 50% of that type of result, I would say.
Wow.
And how would you go about that? Well, getting your protein grams to around 2 grams per kilo is a really good start. The rest depends on how fat someone is, really. So if you're skinny, then you basically need to go into a calorie positive. Yeah. If you're very over fat, you can actually run quite a negative calorie balance and still gain muscle quite effectively. You see it all the time because you're just using your fat for fuel, providing enough protein to rebuild the muscle, and then just maintenance sort of calories from carbs and fat, just to support general activities of everyday living, so you're not feeling too tired. But the other thing to remember about gaining lean mass for most people is it's a really slow process. So if you suddenly go chuck in 500 extra calories every day, the chances are you're going to gain fat weight as well as lean weight. So the rate of muscle development is it's only, you can work it out. There's various equations, but it's only a couple of 100 calories a day at most in surplus. If you're a newbie trainer, you gain quite fast in your first few months, but if you've had a couple of years' experience in the weights room, then the gains will be much slower. So you have to adjust your expectations according to how much experience in the weights room that someone's had.
Yeah.
But I tend to work everything out based on lean mass. So just work out, and I'm a big believer in tracking. So whilst you can start all these processes with equations, with numbers and things like that, the results come when you fine-tune things based on your body composition changes, performance outcomes, and so on. And I'd be getting people to measure those really every week, but certainly no less than bi-weekly.
What's your go-to, mate, on measuring people's sort of body composition? Because obviously there's a lot with DEXA scan, with calipers. What's your go-to?
Yeah, so I really like calipers. I think there's something about taking your top off and having your fat bits pinched. Yeah, sort of. It's psychologically, if you've got to go and see someone and have that done, I think you stick to your program a bit more closely. I think.
I love it.
That being said, I do like multiple methods. So I'm a big fan of measure.
Yep.
The bioimpedance scales are, they jump around all over the place. But if you do them consistently, you'll get consistent inaccuracy. So because it's a machine, I like them back, and it's not subjective. So I use that to verify any caliper changes. But you've got to take a lot of measurements. You can't jump on that once a week. I'll have people on that most days, sometimes twice a day, just so they're aware of fluid balance and how it can alter the readings on the machine.
Yeah.
The photos and the mirror test, are brilliant. Sometimes I've looked after bodybuilders who are not really interested in the calipers, because even if the calipers say they're really lean, if they don't look right, then they're not gonna do well on stage. So it's all about the mirror. Definitely multiple methods, and that gives you an advantage. So sometimes one or two methods won't change, but the third one will. So you've always got a modality that you can, sometimes you might lose visceral fat, and it's not showing up on your caliper test, for example, but it will show up on a waist circumference. DEXA, I don't know. It's expensive. You can't do it that frequently. But it does give you other useful data like bone mineral density. So if you've got an underweight athlete or female athlete, then that can be useful as well.
Yeah, I definitely think like you said there, mate. Like a photo is obviously a lot of time it's super good, and also it's actually what I used to use sort of back in the day. Just like you said, old-fashioned tape measure. I used to have, I think I used to call it 13 points of truth, and just measure 13 different sites on my body once a week and just track it through that. So I think that's another thing that sometimes a little bit old school and a little bit less technology is probably benefits us, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And as long as your arms and legs are getting bigger and your waist is getting smaller, then think generally good. Yeah.
Matt, before then you said about, with the calipers, you're coming in, you've got to think about taking your shirt off and having someone pinch your fat. How much of the work that you do with the general population comes down to mindset? Because people know what to eat, they know what foods are bad, yet they still need nutritionists to help them. So what's your role with people when it comes to mindset?
That's a great question. I think increasingly that piece around behaviour changes is the it's time and time again it's the stumbling block. So like you say, look, if someone's motivated, they could easily Google a semi-decent program and follow it and get results.
Yeah.
So a lot of the success comes from the relationship you build with the client and essentially the number of points of contact and making that person accountable. I spend a lot of time talking to people about how they visualize and do the sort of goal setting, how they make themselves accountable. That sort of self-talk is a massive part of it as well. There's kind of negative self-talk versus positive self-talk.
Yeah.
There's the other thing is about the sort of pleasure-pain continuum. So there's some really interesting stuff around how people frame their behaviours in terms of does it make them feel good, does it make them feel bad, and almost everything other than sort of obvious stuff that is definitely really, really painful and bad for you can be reframed. The simple things is the first time someone does like a lactate workout, they're going to feel horrible, they're going to feel sick. But if they're of the right personality, in 6 months they're going to get a buzz from that type of a training experience.
Yeah.
Even though it's still for what most people would describe as a painful event. And a similar process goes around the foods that people are addicted to or crave, and then they're eating them for comfort. There's a process where they'll go through withdrawal. The drug effect of this sort of sugar, fat, and salt does induce withdrawal effects, which are similar to coming off other drugs. So people are bound to feel a little bit unhappy and potentially unwell as they're adjusting their plan.
Yeah. So what do you suggest to your guys to do when people have that craving, they have a stressful day, they want to get home, they can't be bothered with dinner, they just want to grab food or order food that's really accessible that may not be the best thing to go for? How do you connect to someone to tell them otherwise without them seeing you as a really negative person to have in their life at that minute?
Well, one method I use is a simple traffic light system. So like a bronze, silver, and gold, or amber, green, red. So generally, when people are on track, they'll be scoring golds or greens. Something that might be a 50-50 or grey area might give them an amber or a silver. And if they're off plan, it's a red or a bronze. And then I'll get them to use a calendar. So essentially, that if they've got that feeling and then they've ordered a Chinese takeaway, but there's only one red dot in a month, I'm like, that's fine, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But if the whole week's red dots, then there's just no way they're going to be progressing towards their goals. So sometimes you have to get them to revisit the vision and the reasons why they're engaged in the behaviour change in the first place.
Yeah.
There's a load of stuff I do with Aminos around brain chemistry and trying to alter craving patterns like that. So, almost preempt. There's a phrase, the brain will always win. So if the brain is really hankering after something, it's potentially because it's craving a serotonin boost or trying to get your body to switch off a cortisol response, and so you're leaning towards sugar, fat, salt, potentially alcohol, fast food, stuff like that. So if you can take like a 5-HTP sort of serotonin precursor, glutamine, inositol, there's various herbs that all induce that kind of feel-good factor.
Yeah. So
if
people are getting a message from the brain saying, we need a boost here. Normally people would think, oh, I need some sugar or some chocolate. They say to you, oh, I just really crave chocolate. Actually, it's their brain after a chemical, which might be serotonin in the case, the feel-good chemical for the brain. So you can it's not tricking the brain, but you're actually giving it what it needs without the connection to food. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the chocolate is quite an easy one because you just switch them to an 85%, organic dark chocolate or a 90%, and it's hard to eat more than 2 squares of that. But you can quite happily plough through. I don't do this myself, but
you sound like you've got some experience, mate.
Exactly. No, but milk chocolate is much easier to eat a large amount because it just doesn't satisfy the craving centres in the brain quite as optimally.
Yeah. Are there any other things you can do, like non-food? So something that we talked about a few weeks ago in one of our things that we do called Coach to Coaches is how to make people feel better through actions they do in their day. So if they're craving that sugar hit that is a craving, not an essential thing to the body, can you suggest to them go and say hello to a random person or go and make someone's day? Would that give the brain the same? Does that hit the spot the same as like chocolate would? Have they done any studies on that?
I don't know if they've done studies on it, but essentially that dopamine reward pathway can be fulfilled by doing completing any successful action.
Okay.
If it's a task, a positive interaction with somebody, a learning experience, and it's certainly something I always suggest, because any time you remove or reduce something, you have to replace it with something else. And I think that's something that people often forget. Let's say if someone's, used to going down the pub every night for 4 or 5 pints, and then suddenly, they can't do that. They're just going to be sitting at home twiddling their thumbs. So the chance of a successful outcome situation is really low. But if you get them out, playing 2 hours of tennis or going to the gym, they'll not be thinking about the pub or anything like that, and they're going to get a nice endorphin release, positive brain chemistry sort of process from engaging in that separate activity, and the exercise response as well.
Yeah. So next time you're craving sugar, guys, get up, walk around the office, give everyone some high fives, sit back down, and craving taken care of.
See how it goes. Yeah, I mean, it's funny you actually brought that up, because it's a very similar theory or call to action as is written right at the back of the book, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. He says exactly the same thing. He says if you're craving sugar in the office, he gives you 3 different scenarios. He's like, go around the office, just talk to people, go make a cup of coffee, and try and figure out why that behaviour is happening. So that's a lot of it, Matt, really around people's behaviours, right? When we jump out of performance nutrition, a lot of it is around their behaviours and habits that we create, right?
100%. And I think that process where you make something from feeling unusual into feeling normal and usual, it takes a little bit longer than people probably recognise. Probably it's where you shift that pattern into a different part of the brain. So then if you're not waking up and doing your little 10-minute exercise ritual, it feels weird. It feels different. So it's all about the little. I think the little things that people repeatedly do. I think it's encouraging them to think that they don't have to have a revolution, a massive overhaul, and change 20 things all at once. But if they just change a couple of things each week, keep the mindset firmly focused on the vision. There's potentially work they can do around projecting forward. So like if they don't change their behaviours, how will they feel in 6 months? How will they feel in a year? 5 years? And doing it like that. So that's quite a powerful tool. So if that person stays the same, how are they going to feel in 25 years when they're talking to their son or daughter or grandchildren about how they've handled their life, and then suddenly you think, actually I really do want to give up that negative behaviour.
It's funny, isn't it, to try and get people to tack into that sort of more long-term thinking, and then it really does put things in perspective. But in the moment, sometimes I think it's difficult for people to create those links and those associations, right?
It really is. And look, if you're talking to a young person about long-term health consequences, they're going to be like, no, not interested. How do I get a six-pack?
Mate, let's jump over a little bit to sort of maybe into the general population. What we've obviously seen, I believe more than ever, is general population focusing quite heavily on macronutrient management, which previously even when I was playing a lot of sport early days, it wasn't something that was talked about. What's your views on sort of how much attention people of the general population should be paying to that, and how should we put it all together?
Well, first of all, I think I think that awareness is a good thing. I think, as you said, 20 years ago it was pork pies and mushy peas post training, and even though the post training window is a very forgiving window for any kind of calories, and look, back then you'd struggle to find a health food shop, and now basically there's a smoothie centre on every street corner. So but strangely at the same time, the obesity and diabetes statistics are still going way wrong. So there's a sort of a disparity between the people that know what to do and are doing it, and then the people that just don't know or haven't been taught and continue to do it badly. So in terms of back to your macronutrient question, I think macros is important, but the phrase I like to use is around that. Is a quote from Bruce Lee that it's like when you learn something, when you don't know something, you just eat instinctively. You eat according to hunger, what you like, what you've been brought up on. And then when you start learning, you're like, oh, how many grams of protein's in that? What's this? What's that? You're reading back to labels. But hopefully, after as short a period as possible, you then get back to the instinctive process where you just eat those foods, and they're around about the right kind of macros you need, so they work for you, and then you stop thinking in such a sort of detailed way about your food, because I think a healthy way to eat is not overly critical of intake once you've cleaned up everything, and you know your way around all the tricks that the food industry tries to play on people.
Yeah. It's a minefield out there, though, isn't it, mate? Because the food industry is playing tricks on people. What you must have some, especially you've been in the game a long time. You must have some thoughts on the way that sort of social media influencers, the Kardashians and such, are influencing people's eating decisions these days.
Yeah, I mean, some of that is okay if it's around a sensible brand who've got a quality brand. Some of it I don't like, because I make supplements, and I don't pay my ambassadors. I bet they wish I did pay them, but the point is that I only have people saying my stuff's good if they're already using it and already like using it.
Yeah.
Whereas you can see, sometimes people will pay a footballer like Ronaldo to say that a supplement company, well, one, say that he takes it when he doesn't, and the second thing is to say it's really, really good, like Herbalife or whatever.
Yeah, we certainly see in the sport I work in, the most triathlon, a lot of the athletes are now sponsored by Red Bull, and a lot of the comments on all their social posts is, do you actually really drink that? And they always reply with, yes, I drink 30 minutes before a workout, and it's so stamped in there.
Red Bull have got it kind of down pat, though, because obviously Ross Edgley in the Great British Swim, he did a whole thing on how he has on one of his update shows last week, like a can of Red Bull through it. And the other guy who has actually been on the podcast as well, Tom Evans, ultra runner who's taken ultra running by storm, he's putting out how much of this Red Bull he's drinking as well.
But these guys are absolute outliers to the general population, aren't they? But people think, they're doing it, so I've got a workout coming up, and I'm going to have one a little bit before, and you think, it's just.
But Matt, obviously your brand ambassadors are, as you said, I think when people are not paid, when they use products out of sort of tried, tested, love it, like the brand, obviously like you, then I think that gives a lot more sort of authenticity as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, you'd hope it would do. Although I would say that I'm not against Red Bull. I don't mind people using Red Bull before events and stuff. I've actually, a lot of the footballers use it. And if you're looking at pure, what you need when you're training, well, you need simple sugars. Yeah. And a little bit of caffeine can help you at times as well. Yeah. But I mean, they've done incredibly well, and it's whether the, like you say, it's whether the athletes actually use it or whether they're just paid to say they use it.
Yeah, exactly. So Matt, what have you actually developed? You said you have a line of products, but what are they, and why did you develop them?
Oh, right. So, I'll give you. The initial product I developed was based on the same protocols we used in the 2003 rugby team to enhance the deep sleep with the Aminos. So essentially, one of the reasons they gained so much lean mass is they had an enforced siesta in the afternoon. So there was a whole load of training throughout the morning. Then they had a 3-hour block of time where they were encouraged to have another sleep. And so what we were able to do is give them 2 doses of this amino formula, one before their afternoon sleep and one before their nighttime sleep. So that that's called R5 Aminos, and it's exactly the same blend we used back then, really, just with a few enhancements around, little areas that have got updated over the years, or little things that help the formula be a bit better absorbed.
Yeah, that's amazing that you've developed a supplement to help with. Well, a lot of people think it would be a direct performance enhancer, but it's actually to get more sleep into your athletes, which then obviously helps performance. So
I'm ordering it right now as we speak.
It's so important. It really starts with simple things like that.
And how much sleep were you guys getting, mate?
Averaging 8 to 10 hours in a 24-hour cycle.
Massive.
Yeah.
Wow. And you say in a 24-hour cycle, so obviously they might have split that little afternoon nap or post-training in the morning nap, or is that how it went?
Yeah, exactly. So you might have 7.5 at night, and then a 2-hour siesta kind of thing. Yeah.
Siesta sounds great.
Yeah.
If I bring that back into national curriculum,
you should have called it siesta.
Yeah, right.
So is that the main sort of thing, mate? Obviously, folks, if you're wondering what we're talking about here, go over to aminoman.com. That's basically where we get it from, Matt, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, So there are. I mean, there's a lot of different supplements on there. I'm pretty much covering all the basics. So there's multivitamin, very high quality. All the philosophy is around using, as organic as possible, the highest quality ingredients, all that pure pharmaceutical grade, all that sort of stuff. So, but the edge is in some of the more unique blends. There's one called Metabolic Amino Complex, which is a pre and intra workout training support amino blend. No stimulants.
Right.
There's a focus formula, so like for cognition, memory.
Wow.
But have a little dig around. All the formulas have got a full scientific write-up, so every ingredient, the study related to why it's in the formula.
Yeah.
And the other thing to mention to people is the reason the formulas have been put together is basically because there's been 5 to 10 years of using all those ingredients in separate pots before we've sort of hit on a blend that works well for people.
Yeah.
So it's kind of it's a mixture of understanding the science, the references on the individual ingredients, but then also in the trenches, testing on myself, testing on athletes, and then finding out what makes people really, really work well.
Mate, I know what would make me work well. The recovery aminos that is hot chocolate, something in the title. I think that's some great marketing we've got in there. Just about to press order on the $49.99 one there with hot chocolate in it. It sounds, or the blueberry aminos. But yeah, folks, definitely go and check out. And I think one thing, mate, as well that people should have a look at is a list of your ambassadors working there. Some really top level athletes that are taking this stuff, as you said, because they believe it as well, mate. And I think that's a testament to what you've developed, really.
Thank you, mate.
No, it's super good. What other stuff, mate? And obviously big on aminos. What other, if people are looking for something in their performance, they feel they've got their diet tuned in, what's your next sort of go-to?
That's a really good question. I would say the only way to know that is to do some more in-depth testing.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer in blood work, hormone work, but you will only know what you really need if you have a proper look. And even really, really good diets, I would say it's the exception to the rule. If you test someone's blood, that something doesn't turn up a little bit low somewhere.
Yeah.
It could be obvious stuff is vitamin D. Obviously, you guys won't be suffering as badly with that. But even so, in Dubai, if you work in an office all day and avoid the sun because you're worried about getting wrinkly, then
and people who wear sunglasses all day.
I think we actually I spoke. We had nutritionists on the show from the UK that was working with a lot of CrossFit athletes over here, and he was actually quite surprised with the low levels of vitamin D within a lot of the athletes because of what Tom said, that we're sort of inside a lot and wearing sunglasses outside as well. So it's interesting. We've got bucket loads of the stuff and no one really absorbs it. So
No one uses it.
The thing is, if you people worry about burning, but if you're in Dubai and that kind of intensive sun, if you just got as naked as you were comfortable with, so as long as you don't get arrested and stuff.
So that's a bit of a risk.
Just do 10 minutes, like sizzle one side 10 minutes, sizzle the other side 10 minutes. You'll get a massive vitamin D flood into the body, and you'll get. You won't burn, so there'll be, none of that kind of worries about skin damage from the UVA and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's a real common deficiency, and the second most common deficiency I see is just omega-3s. People just don't often eat enough fish. You can't eat too much, because if you eat too much, you get all the mercury.
Yeah.
So it's a sort of fine balance between eating it about 4 times a week, getting all the omega-6 fats out of your diet from vegetable oil, fried foods, all those other nasty things. So those two are almost always out of balance. And then things pop up, little things like you might see a bit low B12, folate, there might be a mineral missing. People that are into their supplements often take way too much zinc. So you can see low copper as a result of that, because the zinc blocks the copper absorption. Okay. So you get little things that need fine tuning. So it's worth spending a couple £100 on a panel at least once a year, just so you know what's going on inside. I think. Yeah,
Matt. One of the reasons we wanted to get you on the show is you've got such a good body of experience, and what we're seeing a lot over the past few years is nutritionists or people claiming to be nutritionists. They've done a weekend course here and there, or even worse, an online course or something like that.
Online's the best.
Online is the best.
I know.
How often do you read things online and just go, "Oh no"? Like, what are the most common mistakes you see from self-proclaimed nutritionists out there?
Well, I think giving people supplements without knowing what their levels are is a dangerous area.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you'd see, protocols based around optimizing hormones that might, on that same tip about zinc, a low testosterone protocol. So someone's given 50 milligrams of zinc to take every day, and actually probably if you did that, you'd only really be looking to do that for 2 weeks, but then 6 months later they're coming back and they've got zinc toxicity symptoms, because isolating a single nutrient and taking it in large amounts like that is just really, really dangerous. I think the other thing I don't like to see too much is advice around extreme versions of dieting. So you could take, what's on vogue now is really the ketosis type stuff.
Yeah.
Now, again, there's valid reasons to do that for short periods of time, absolutely valid. There's medical reasons to do it. But I think if you're following a long-term ketotic diet, then you've got to be really careful. And there's a ton of different mineral, electrolyte type imbalances that people need to look at. And that's when blood tests and things like that become really, really important. And on the flip side, the other thing that is massively popular is this shift towards plant-based feeding, which I think is really positive, because I think we all should eat primarily a plant-based diet, but I just believe that you should have a plant-based diet plus a little bit of fish plus a little bit of meat, but not too much, just as much as you need. But getting people to eat more plants is really good, but maybe getting people to eat plants and nothing else, then again, you got to look and see, well, where's that going to lead in 6 months, and what deficiencies will show up. Because I think if you eat that, you can eat like that long term, but you just have to be very careful and aware of which food you need more of, which food you need less of.
Yeah. So if you have just taken on a nutritionist, or you're following a nutritionist, and they're telling you that this one diet is the way, or you feel like the diet's a bit extreme, or they're telling you need this supplement and they have no idea what your blood work is, you need to be a little bit mindful of where they're getting their information from. Yeah,
and absolutely, I think that's a great summary of what I've just been trying to emphasise. And I think the thing is, a lot of these diets are a little bit better than most people eat anyway. So you do feel better in the initial instance.
Yeah, and you do lose the weight to begin with.
You feel better for a month, 2 months, but then further down the line, that's where the longer term deficiencies are going to manifest, and then people are going to start to feel unwell.
I think that's it. You get initial ups, and then people. And there's not many people that sort of went to a plant-based diet after watching What the Health that I know that are still on it. Like it's. Yeah, and I think what you said earlier, mate, is that people do sort of fall back into routines, and that's why understanding the habits of why you eat what you eat, and then what happens is probably is paramount as well to people's success with it. So, yeah. Well, Matt, I mean, we've taken a lot of your time. You're obviously a super busy guy, mate. We just really appreciate you taking the time. It's we've had a few different people on nutrition, and you've topped them, mate. You've really with the experience that you've got, and I think the way that you framed a lot of stuff as well. I actually expected Tom to get a lot more geeky with you, but we managed to keep it very very easy for people. So, mate, I really appreciate what you're doing, and congratulations on what you've done, mate. It's
thank you, Matt.
Epic CV, so to speak, you've got there. So thank you so much, mate. We really appreciate it.
Thank you guys, and thanks a lot for having me on.
That's at all. People go and check Matt out, aminoman.com. Definitely get that chocolate aminos we were talking about before. That's awesome. Matt, we'll stay connected, but thank you so much for your time, mate. We really appreciate it.
All right, cheers guys.
Thank you.